Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Emma Gillespie.
I'm Lucy Tassell.
More than 1 in 3 men report using intimate partner violence, which is any behaviour in an intimate relationship that causes physical, sexual or psychological harm, while an estimated 120,000 men nationally each year start to use it for the first time. That's according to a government-backed study known as 10 to Men, a research initiative that measures mental health and well-being, paternal relationships, demographics, social support and life satisfaction.
Launched in 2013, 10 to Men is the largest longitudinal study on male health globally, with a total cohort of 24,000 men involved today. Its program lead, Dr. Sean Martin from the Australian Institute of Family Studies, says these findings provide a set of risk factors to help support the development of effective policies and programs for young men.
Dr. Sean Martin, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We are talking, of course, today about the data from the 10 to Men report this week, a really comprehensive study into the use of intimate partner violence among Australian men. But before we get into the findings, I'd be really interested to hear your involvement in the study, how the data was collected. What do we need to know about this report?
Sure. Well, I'm the program lead for the study, have been for the past 3 years or so, but I've been involved in men's health really for over 20 years now. So I have some familiarity with, both the content and the field in general. But in terms of 10 to Men, it's really the largest longitudinal study of male health in the world at this point. In terms of this specific report, what we did was when the guys were recruited back in 2013 and 14, we asked them, as we always do, a series of measures. One of them was around intimate partner violence. And at that point, around 1 in 4 men reported having ever used any form of intimate partner violence. And so this report demonstrates that when we last assessed these guys back in 2022, that estimate had increased to over 1 in 3, 35%. So our study by design is meant to represent the broader Australian population that they're drawn from. So when we took the estimates from this report and applied it to the Australian population, that equates to around about 120,000 men per year using these types of behaviour for the first time.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty startling number for a lot of people who might not be as familiar with this space and the prevalence of intimate partner violence. But of course, that term represents a whole range of different forms of violence. What are we talking about when we're talking about intimate partner abuse? What can you tell us about these different forms and what the study found about their prevalence?
Sure. So we used a measure called the COSAR measure, which was one of the only measures that was validated or tested for use in men at the time, back in 2013, 14. There's since mercifully been a real increase in the measures that covers a whole range of these types of behaviours that are covered under the umbrella of intimate partner violence. But for us, we're talking specifically about emotional type violence. So our guys were sent a series of questions around those types of behaviours, as well as physical type violence and sexual type violence. So they collectively focused around the use of intimate partner violence in the case of this report.
How did the study account for these boys and men self-identifying those behaviours versus a potential kind of lack of keenness to disclose maybe some more concerning behaviours? What was the kind of self-awareness like in that process?
Yeah, no, it's a really important question. The first thing we always do is make sure that we do use these, validated measures that have been tested for these sorts of issues. So some of those issues are like the test recall bias, so whether or not people consistently report the same sorts of measures across time. Another thing we can do as a study is treat really seriously the privacy and confidentiality of our respondents. None of our respondents are able to be identified personally. The information that they provide us is safe, it's secure. They know that in providing that information, they don't put themselves or their families at risk or at harm. And we make sure that they know of that and they're confident around that, because we do ask a range of sensitive information, including intimate partner violence. So we need to be really consistent in making sure we dedicate some efforts to that area. And also to, I guess, as we go along, we build some trust with our participants. So we're able to have trust ourselves in the validity of the data. And I guess we've done a lot of work in making sure that the information that we do extract is as accurate as possible.
The study also looks at men's mental health, providing this longitudinal snapshot of mental health. What were the standout findings in that topic area? Is there a relationship between poor mental health and intimate partner violence?
Yes, there is a very strong one. Actually, it's one of our strongest predictors. So when we looked again at our men, those that had clinically significant depressive symptoms were very much more likely to report intimate partner violence later on down the track. And again, when we looked at suicidality, so unfortunately men who might have had suicidal thoughts or plans or even attempts, they were also at a significant risk of later use of intimate partner violence. But we were also interested in identifying some protective factors. So we looked particularly at social connectedness. So that's a respondent's sense of connection to friends, to families, and also their community. And those men who reported higher levels of social connection were actually much less likely to use intimate partner violence. And also, and I think uniquely for our study, we're able to demonstrate that people who reported a very high level of paternal affection, so we use, again, another validated measures called the paternal affection score. Those men that had a high level of paternal affection were at a much reduced level of risk for using intimate partner violence in their adult life. In fact, their risk was almost halved. So, we were able to look at a couple of key risk factors that we hope might be able to be used to help reduce the overall level of this behaviour.
Yeah, I was really interested in the findings around men and their relationships with their fathers and the role that plays in intimate partner violence. Also, the data around well-being and social connection that you've touched on. For men who were in the 2 in 3 who had not reported intimate partner violence, what were the key points that differentiated their outcomes as opposed to the 1 in 3 men who did report intimate partner violence?
Hello, Billy here from TDA. We have just looked at our YouTube analytics and 95% of you who are watching our videos aren't subscribing. If you want to help independent media like us grow, the best way you can do that is by pressing subscribe. Thank you so much, and back to the video.
Yeah, look, it's a great question. So, I mean, first of all, we did some sort of descriptive analyses. So we looked at, some of the age differences, a range of other what's called priority population groups. And essentially there was no differences between those groups. The sort of tide rose equally amongst all of those groups, if you like. So not too many differences there. The differences were really sort of concentrated on those risk factors that I've just spoken about. So around mental health, around paternal affection, and around social connection. So, as I say, these types of studies are relatively new in terms of using longitudinal analyses to, I guess, predict what factors may prevent these sorts of behaviours. But there are certainly a couple of key ones we've been able to identify beforehand, and hopefully they will be able to be used to inform some targeted prevention strategies to try to, as I say, minimise the rise of this type of behaviour and, in fact, try to reduce it accordingly.
Were there any trends around inequality? Does a person's kind of demographic, socioeconomic status, does that play a role in intimate partner violence, or do these findings suggest that this is an indiscriminate issue?
Look, great question. In terms of, I guess, socio-economic factors, we're really keen to take a deep dive look at those into the future. Decades of research that have identified the key roles that some of those factors might play, like also relationship issues like previous abuse people might have suffered, like alcohol and other drug usage. There's a whole range of issues. Mercifully, we have a lot of data around that, so we're very keen to sort of explore that further. And as I mentioned before, in future ways, we'll be trying to expand our measures so we can have a comprehensive view of how these behaviours arise.
What's the path forward now that we have this research? What will it mean in terms of supporting men to develop healthier relationships in their families with their partners, as well as, encouraging them to seek support to reduce rates of intimate partner violence? What are the next steps?
Yeah, look, first of all, I've got to acknowledge we are but one study, and so others will also be looking at this area, and we'll learn from their approaches as well. In terms of what we'll do, as I mentioned before, we've just completed our most recent wave. That is, the data from that is coming to our fieldwork provider, to us, and so we'll be in a position to start to look at these sorts of issues by the end of the year, and we'll do so with our, friends and colleagues within government and outside of government. We'll also be looking to expand our measures for our next wave and hopefully future waves to start to really get to understand some of those issues. But I guess in terms of your question around, what we do to address some of these risk factors, like, for instance, mental health, where there's a lot of conversations at the moment occurring around mental health and specifically men's mental health. I think some of those support services, those interventions are already in place. And so I guess to some extent, the jury is still out on the effectiveness of those. Now, the focus from a research perspective is really focusing on what works and making sure that people, when they do recognise these sorts of issues, are able to get support and able to get appropriate support and able to get timely support to reduce intimate partner violence. And that's true also too for social connection, where there's a great range of online and other emerging initiatives that men and young men in particular can engage with. And likewise for parents, as a society, obviously, we've shifted to a space where men, and young men in particular, are often the primary caregivers. As a government and also other areas, there's often not those levels of support that people and young men need in that critical period of their life. And that's also sort of emerging as well. So hopefully we will start to see the effects of those shortly.
You've obviously been very deep in the trenches of navigating this data, compiling these findings, sharing them with the world. Now the report's been out for a few days. What's the response been like? Has it surprised you? Have there been any sort of key findings that people have really paid attention to that you weren't expecting?
It's been a great response, really. By and large, I understand the point of view that this data will be confronting to a lot of people. Again, there's not much data like this that's out there. These are, lifetime estimates, so they are naturally higher than, say, annual incident data or data that occurs every sort of couple of years. But nevertheless, they're high, and our reports suggest that they're increasing. So it's a challenge for us as a sector. It's a challenge for us really as a community, is how we address those. From a government perspective, they've invested very heavily in the national plan to end violence against women and children. My hope and the hope of others is this is sort of a high water mark, and we will start to see those rates begin to decline with our data and with others that are sort of coming online shortly. It's obviously, as the Prime Minister himself and others have commented, a bit of what it is, a national crisis. So it's spawned a lot of activity. We're very keen to continue to learn from others, work collaboratively with others, and hopefully, ultimately, our job is to provide evidence that can provide targeted intervention to try to reduce the levels that we're seeing out there in the community.
We will pop some links to resources in today's show notes if you want to find out more about these support services. We'll also include a link to the study we chatted through today if you want to take a closer look at those findings. We will be back later on today with the headlines, but until then, have a good one.